also want to talk about the possibility, the great possibility, in my opinion, of President Trump taking over law enforcement in Washington, D.C. I'm sure you've heard the story by now of the ex-Doge staffer who got beat up brutally outside of D.C., and that just shed light on, unfortunately, common knowledge that Washington, D.C. is not the safest area in the country by far. Actually, it is hugely riddled with crime. Now, when President Trump said, hey, I might have to take it over, obviously the lib media went nuts. Oh my gosh, how could he do this? Well, constitutionally. For people who aren't aware, and I would imagine the audience is very aware of this, the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., is the seat of the federal government, which constitutionally needs to be separate from the states for a whole lot of reasons that we don't need to necessarily get into right now. But basically, everything they do in the District of Columbia is under the supervision of the federal government. The mayor that exists there kind of is just there, I don't want to say necessarily just for show, but she's there because the federal government allows her to be there. So what I think could possibly happen here may be a foundation of how to run a big blue city. So many of our big cities around the country are deep blue, and therefore they're lax on crime, and therefore they're crime riddled. If President Trump were to exercise the authority of the federal government, take over the city, clean it up, drop the crime rate, specifically the violent crime rate, down to as low as it can possibly go, well, that actually might be good for blue cities all over the country. But I'm fascinated to hear comments and thoughts from our guest panel. Joy Backless Cruz, I think I messed that up last time too. Sorry. Joy Backless Cruz is a conservative commentator, and Greg Lykov is a syndicated columnist. Guys, thanks so much for joining. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for having us.
Joy, I'd love to start with you here. So again, unfortunately, and I don't like talking about this, but it's just a fact of reality, another violent attack happened in Washington, D.C. that made headlines. Now, violent attacks happen all the time, but because there's so many important people in Washington, D.C., this one made headlines. A former Doge staffer got beat up. And again, this is among many crimes there. Yeah. Do you think the president, one, would be within his rights, and two, politically be welcomed if he decided, hey, we're going to use the federal government, we're going to use the National Guard, we're going to clean up Washington, D.C.?
Absolutely. Here's the thing. DC is among one of the most crime-ridden cities in the United States by almost every single metric. The kiss of death has certainly threatened me with a good time in the parking lot of a DC McDonald's. And DC is a unique city. We have lawmakers there. We have admin there. Their families are there. They deserve to be able to make laws for our country and govern our country without the threat of death all the time. And that's just not the case right now. Lawlessness is the mainstream, and they don't deserve that. They deserve to feel safe while they are serving our country. So it is our responsibility to protect our lawmakers. And if that means taking over the DC police, who clearly aren't doing a very good job, and bringing in people who actually know what they're doing, like the National Guard, sounds good to me. And for all intents and purposes, as far as I know, Big Balls is a hero. He is saving the West, not only working for Doge, but also on the streets, helping women and being what a true man is.
Yeah, it is fascinating to see, and I'm hopeful that we see the administration step in and set an example. But I guess, yeah, speaking of examples, Gregory, I would love to see the Trump administration really set a baseline for big cities, because so often you hear people from New York City, Los Angeles, San Francisco, other big cities around the country saying, "Oh, it's too big to control. This is just kind of the byproduct of having a lot of people in one suburban space." I don't think that's true. I think if you enforce laws that are already on the books, you can actually clean up these blue cities. Do you think if President Trump, and again, I hate to talk in hypotheticals, but if he decides to go through with this, take over the DC law enforcement and turn it around entirely, that would be a blueprint for cities around the country?
Yeah, look, definitely. That's the obvious here. And it's important to mention that DC in just the last year increased their homicide rate by over 40%. So when you have a city where murders are committed every single day, multiple murders are committed every single day, there's an obvious issue. And when that city is the capital of the United States, the greatest country on earth, and Doge staffers, for example, or any other department, governmental department staffer are getting attacked every day, there's a concern there. And I think that's obvious. President Trump, with his resources, we saw that the National Guard did a wonderful job in Los Angeles when the protests were going on earlier in the year, and that was a huge success. I want to see that in DC, because if we have it in DC, if DC turns into this garbage pail of a city and turns into an actual clean, nice city that everyone wants to live in, we can see New York do the same thing, and Los Angeles and all the other liberal cities out there.
Yeah, that's well, you know, in Los Angeles, it wasn't there were just a couple people getting together, having fun watching cars burn. And if you understand that reference, thanks for watching the show routinely.